Happy Easter, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Christ the Lord is risen today. Alleluia. Sons of men and angels say, Alleluia. Raise your joys and triumphs high. Alleluia. Sing ye heavens and earth reply. Alleluia. Love's redeeming work is done. Alleluia. Fought the fight, the battle won. Alleluia. Death in vain forbid him rise. Alleluia. Christ has opened paradise. Alleluia. Hail the Lord of earth and heaven. Alleluia. Praise to thee by both be given. Alleluia. He we greet triumphant now. Alleluia. Hail the resurrection now. Alleluia.
Good morning and a blessed Easter to you. Our scripture this morning is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, the first 10 verses. Now after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the grave. And behold, a severe earthquake had occurred, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled away the stone and sat upon it. His appearance was like lightning, and his garments as white as snow. And the guards shook for fear of him, and became like dead men. And the angel answered and said to the women, Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who has been crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, just as he said. Come, see the place where he is lying. And go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you. And they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy. They ran to report it to his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and greeted them. And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, Do not be afraid. Go and take word to my brethren to leave for Galilee, and there they shall see me. Would you pray with me, please? God of light and life, of new light and new life, your angels appeared to the faithful women of Jesus' company, bringing them news more wonderful and awe-inspiring than they could ever hope for or imagine, that Christ was risen. We are bold enough to ask for such an interruption as well, an earthquake that might break into our days of loss and fear and death, so we might hear anew a message of joy and hope. Help us roll back the heavy stones from our lives and know Christ is risen, that Christ is risen inside us and for us, and bringing to us new life, bringing us into new life. Thanks be to you, O God. Amen. No matter which gospel you read on Easter morning, they were up early, those women. They had things to do. Jesus had been killed and quickly buried. He'd been publicly executed by the authorities, who feared the way he seemed to inspire revolution in those who knew him and trusted his teachings. He spoke of an alternate kingdom, a new rule that was coming, and his followers seemed to believe that he was about to declare himself as king of this new order. With the city as crowded as it was during this religious festival, things could get out of hand and turn bloody very fast. He'd become a problem for his own people, one they could no longer handle on their own. So the power of Rome was needed. And what better opportunity to remind everyone who was in charge and how they took care of troublemakers. So they had Jesus put to death. This confrontation was inevitable. Jesus had been teaching about a new kingdom, one of peace and justice, though, one unlike anything Rome had ever known before. But what they did not understand was that it was nothing that they could undo or undermine with violence or threats. Jesus' own people did not understand it completely, not at first. That's why he had to show them with healings and feedings, with forgiveness of sins, and dining with those that they had been taught to reject, to despise, and to hate. He had to tell them stories to get them to understand, stories about faithless sons and forgiving fathers, about lost coins and missing sheep, about unexpected mercy and unlikely generosity. He had to challenge the authority of a corrupt religious system, to maintain about those who had colluded with a corrupt regime to maintain the status quo, to create a false sense of peace and security that came at the expense of their faith, the faith to which they had been entrusted. When he threw away the money changers, when he threw the money changers out of the temple, he publicly humiliated the temple authorities, and he challenged the authority of Rome. That was enough during the feast of the Passover to put the gears in motion that would lead to his execution. Death by crucifixion, the most public and likely most painful of all executions that Rome could impose on political dissenters. They buried Jesus quickly, leaving no time left to properly prepare his body for burial. So after Sabbath had passed, the women were up early to check on his death, to see what could be done. Someone who was to them both notable and beloved had died. Crucifixions were fairly commonplace, and Jesus was likely one among many crucified on that same day. The lone cross on a hill is a romantic image, but it's probably far from accurate. But his death was personal, to a small group of followers at least, and maybe to a larger group of those whose lives he had touched and changed. And these two Marys were up early, very concerned about what needed to be done to see that he was buried properly. In these last few weeks, we've been greeted every morning and updated all day long with news about death, just like these women were. Every morning we hear about the new and total cases of COVID-19, Deaths in the last 24 hours, total deaths so far locally, nationally, and globally. We get stories of those recently infected and who may have passed. Is it anyone we know? Has it become personal yet? But does that really matter? Maybe it does matter. Maybe it doesn't. But I want us to think right now about the fact that what really matters is what happened next in the Easter story, how that matters to us. Mary Magdalene had become a follower of Jesus late in his ministry. The other Mary, as Matthew calls her, was most likely Mary, Jesus' own mother. They experienced an earthquake in the garden, literally and figuratively. They see an angel descend, roll away the stone, and sit on it. The guards are frightened by that, frightened enough that ironically they react to the opening of the tomb by becoming like dead people themselves. The angel's first words contrast the guards with the women. The angel says, "Don't you be afraid." The angel is commanding them to reject their fear. For this is all good news. I know that you're looking for Jesus, the angel says. Jesus, the crucified one, he is not here, for he is raised just as he told you he would be. The resurrection has already happened. The stone was rolled away not to let Jesus out, but to let the witnesses in. So the angel sends the women to carry the good news to the disciples. The women immediately, with fear and with great joy, obey the angel's command. They run to announce this impossibly possible good news. On the way, Jesus meets them and repeats the angel's command to stop being afraid. He is alive and present with them. Why should they fall prey to fear? Why should they leave room for anything in their lives except worship and overwhelming joy? This Easter may turn out to be our time to truly hear that message in ways we've not heard it before. What underlies resurrection in this story is reconciliation, because what has been separated has been brought back together.